I am Samuel, 36 years old, and I was standing in a courtroom watching my own family strip me of my dignity, fully prepared to sign away my future for a pile of dirt and debt. Before I tell you about the moment the doors swung open and changed my life forever, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. The morning the gavel was set to fall on my grandfather's legacy, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with a rain that refused to drop. Felt fitting. I pulled my truck into the courthouse parking lot. It's a 2012 Ford F-150, reliable but tired. The suspension squeaks when I take a corner too fast, and the bed is permanently stained with oil and hay. I parked it way in the back, away from the reserved spots near the entrance. I didn't need to look at the reserved spots to know they were already taken. I could see the sun glinting off the chrome grille of a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. That was my parents, Grant and Linda. Beside it sat a Porsche Panamera Turbo in a shade of silver that looked like liquid money. That belonged to my sister, Alyssa. Just seeing those cars made my stomach turn. It wasn't jealousy. I've never cared about engines that cost more than a house. It was what those cars represented. They represented a world where value was determined by the shine, not the substance. A world I had never fit into, and frankly, a world I had stopped trying to join a long time ago. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had tried to clean up. I was wearing my only suit, a navy blue off-the-rack number I'd bought for a friend's wedding 5 years ago. It was a little tight across the shoulders now. Baling hay and wrestling stubborn colts tends to broaden you out, and I had scrubbed my hands raw trying to get the engine grease out from under my fingernails. I didn't think I'd succeeded. I still looked like what I was. A man who worked with his hands, about to walk into a room full of people who paid others to do that for them. I took a deep breath, grabbing the worn leather folder from the passenger seat. Inside were the documents that would seal my fate. Just get it over with, Samuel. I whispered to myself. Sign the papers, take the horses, and get out. The walk to the courthouse steps felt like a march to the gallows. The air was thick and humid. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw them. They were standing in a tight circle near the metal detectors, laughing. My mother, Linda, was wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my truck. She looked younger than her 60 years, thanks to a team of surgeons and a life spent avoiding direct sunlight. My father, Grant, was checking his watch, a gold Patek Philippe, and tapping his Italian loafers impatiently on the marble floor. And then there was Alyssa, my older sister, the golden child. She spotted me first. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. It was a practiced expression, something she had perfected in boardrooms and VIP lounges. Samuel, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous hall. You made it. We were worried you might have broken down on the highway. My father chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. I told you he should have scrapped that heap years ago. It's an embarrassment to the family name. Good morning, I said, keeping my voice steady. I wasn't going to let them see me rattle. The truck runs fine, Dad. For now, my mother added, brushing an invisible speck of dust from her sleeve. Just try not to park it right in front of the entrance, dear. We have dinner reservations at Le Monde after this, and I don't want to smell like exhaust. I parked in the back, I said. You won't even see it. Good, Alyssa said, checking her phone. She typed a furious reply to someone, her thumbs flying across the screen. Let's go. My lawyer charges by the hour, and I have a flight to Milan tonight. Let's not drag this out. We moved through security. The guard gave me a sympathetic nod as I emptied my pockets. Just a cheap wallet and a set of truck keys. My family, on the other hand, had to offload jewelry, heavy watches, and 2 smartphones each. The courtroom was cold. It smelled of floor wax and old paper. We took our seats. My family sat on the left, a united front of expensive fabric and confident posture. I sat on the right, alone. Well, not entirely alone. Elliot Lane was already there, sitting at the defense table. Elliot was 80 years old if he was a day. He had been my grandfather's lawyer for 40 years. He wore a tweed suit that looked like it had been fashionable in 1970 and smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and peppermint. He was the only person in this room, other than me, who had actually cried at my grandfather's funeral. "Morning, Samuel," Elliot whispered, giving my arm a squeeze. His hands were shaking slightly. Parkinson's, I suspected, though he never admitted it, but his eyes were sharp. "You holding up?" "I just want this over, Elliot," I murmured. "They have the leverage. I can't fight them anymore." Elliot looked across the aisle at Alyssa, who was currently whispering something to her high-powered attorney, a shark named Marcus with teeth too white to be real. "Leverage is a funny thing, son," Elliot said softly. "Sometimes what looks like a mountain is just a shadow." "They have the tax liens, Elliot," I reminded him. "They have the bank notes. If I don't agree to the split, they'll force a liquidation. The farm gets sold for scraps, the horses go to the glue factory, and Alyssa buys the hotel at auction anyway. This is the only way I save the animals." Elliot nodded slowly. "I know. I drafted the agreement. But remember what your grandfather used to say about patience. Grandpa is gone, Elliot." "His words aren't," the old lawyer said, turning his gaze to the judge's bench. "Just read before you sign. That's all I ask." "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Halloway entered. He was a stern man with a face like carved granite. He looked at the docket, then at us. He didn't look happy. Probate cases were messy, and family feuds were the messiest of all. "Estate of Arthur Vale," the judge read. "We are here to finalize the distribution of assets. I understand the parties have reached a mutual agreement." Alyssa's lawyer, Marcus, stood up. He smoothed his tie with a predatory grace. "Yes, Your Honor. After much negotiation, the beneficiaries have agreed to a division of the estate." He picked up a document and walked toward the bench, but he stopped halfway to address the room, turning it into a performance. "The estate consists primarily of two assets," Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. "First, the Grandview Hotel, a historic property downtown, currently valued at approximately $50 million. Second, the Old Oak Ranch, a rural property on the outskirts of the county, currently appraised at, well, significantly less." He paused for effect. Alyssa smirked. "My client, Ms. Alyssa Vale, has graciously agreed to take on the burden of the Grandview Hotel," Marcus continued. "She will assume management, operations, and all future liabilities. In exchange, Mr. Samuel Vale will receive the Old Oak Ranch in its entirety." The judge peered over his glasses. "The disparity in value is significant, Counselor. The hotel is worth $50 million. The ranch is appraised at $1 million, give or take." "Ah, but there are conditions," Marcus said, smiling at me. It was a cold, cruel smile. "Mr. Samuel Vale is also assuming the outstanding tax liabilities associated with the ranch, which I believe total close to $800,000. Furthermore, he is waiving any claim to the family trust's liquid cash, which will go to Mr. and Mrs. Vale Sr. to cover administrative costs." The judge looked at me. "Mr. Vale, is this true? You are accepting a property valued at $1 million, carrying nearly $1 million in debt, while your sister walks away with a $50 million hotel." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I could feel my father's eyes boring into the back of my head. I knew what he was thinking. Loser. Sucker. Weak. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. "Yes, Your Honor. And you understand that by signing this, you are releasing all other claims?" the judge asked. "Once this is done, you cannot come back and ask for a share of the hotel profits. You are severing your financial ties to the main estate." "I understand," I said. Alyssa let out a small, audible sigh of relief. She leaned over to Mom and whispered, "He's actually going to do it. I told you he was soft." Mom patted her hand. "He never had the head for business, darling. He's happier playing in the dirt." I gripped the edge of the table. They thought I couldn't hear them, or maybe they just didn't care. "Samuel," the judge said, his voice softer now. "Why?" I looked at the judge. Then I looked at Alyssa. She looked victorious. She looked like she had just won the Super Bowl. She was thinking about the penthouse suite at the Grandview, about the parties she would throw, about the inheritance she had secured. Because, I said, my voice gaining a little strength, the ranch is where my grandfather lived. It's where he died. It's the only place in this family that ever felt like a home. The hotel, it's just a building. It's just money. I can't let the ranch be turned into a landfill. Alyssa rolled her eyes. Oh, spare us the melodrama, Samuel. You're taking the farm because you're afraid of the real world. You want to hide out there with your horses and pretend you're a cowboy. Ms. Vale, restrain yourself, the judge snapped. He looked back at me. Very well. If you are competent and willing, I will not stand in the way of a mutual agreement. Clerk, present the settlement. The court clerk walked over and placed the heavy document in front of me. It was thick, pages and pages of legalese that boiled down to one thing. I was getting the scraps. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. Just think, Samuel, Alyssa called out, unable to help herself. While I'm renovating the Grandview lobby with Italian marble, you'll be shoveling manure to pay off back taxes. But hey, it's what Grandpa would have wanted, right? He always did like you best. Funny how he left you with nothing. My father laughed. It's a life lesson, son. Sink or swim. I looked at the paper. I looked at the word Grandview Hotel next to Alyssa's name. I looked at Old Oak Ranch next to mine. I thought about the debt. I thought about the struggle. I knew I would be eating instant noodles for the next 10 years to pay off those taxes. I knew I would be working 18-hour days. But then I thought about the horses. I thought about the old oak tree on the hill. I pressed the pen to the paper. Scritch scratch. I signed my name. Samuel Vale. Done, I said, putting the pen down. Alyssa practically leaped from her seat. She grabbed her copy of the agreement and signed it with a flourish, her signature huge and looping. Thank you, Samuel, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You really made this easy for us. Order, the judge said. The settlement is entered into the record. The assets are transferred effective immediately. Alyssa turned to her lawyer. Give me the keys. Marcus handed her a heavy brass ring with a set of electronic keycards. The master keys to the Grandview, Ms. Vale. Congratulations. She held them up, jingling them like a trophy. My parents clapped politely. We should celebrate, my mother said. Champagne brunch. Definitely, Alyssa said. She looked at me one last time. You're welcome to join us, Samuel. I'm sure we can put it on the company card. As a charity write-off. I packed my folder. No thanks. I have horses to feed. I turned to leave. I wanted to get out of there before I punched something. I had saved the farm, yes, but the humiliation was burning a hole in my chest. I felt small. I felt defeated. I was halfway to the aisle when the double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They flew open. Bam! The sound echoed like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Alyssa stopped mid-laugh. My father dropped his smile. The judge looked up, annoyed. Standing in the doorway was a man. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a cop. He was wearing a black suit, but not a fashionable one. It was utilitarian. He held a long, black tube case, the kind architects or surveyors used to carry blueprints. He walked with a purpose that made the air in the room change. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked at the map in his hand. Then he looked at us. Who holds the deed? His voice boomed. It was a deep, gravelly voice. Excuse me? The judge asked. This is a closed session. Who are you? The man ignored the judge. He walked straight past the bar, right into the well of the court. He slammed the tube onto the plaintiff's table, right in front of Alyssa. I asked. The man said, who holds the deed to the Grandview Hotel? And who holds the deed to the Old Oak Ranch? Alyssa stepped forward, annoyed. I own the hotel, as of 2 minutes ago. And who the hell are you? The man looked at her. He didn't blink. Then he looked at me. And you? He asked. You have the ranch? I do, I said. The man looked at me, and his expression softened. Just a fraction. He nodded. "My name is Arthur Sterling," he said. "I am the director of the State Geological Survey and Urban Planning Commission." He unzipped the tube. He pulled out a massive laminated map. He spread it out over the table, covering Alyssa's legal papers. "I apologize for the interruption, Your Honor," Sterling said, finally addressing the judge. "But I was informed the transfer of assets was happening today. I had to get here before the ink was dry." "Why?" the judge asked. Sterling looked at Alyssa, then at me. "Because," Sterling said, "one of you has just purchased a catastrophe, and the other has just become the wealthiest landowner in the state." Alyssa laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Well, obviously, the hotel is worth $50 million. Sterling looked at her, and for the first time he smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. "Is it?" he asked. And that was the moment everything changed. To understand why Arthur Sterling's arrival was like a lightning bolt hitting that courtroom, you have to understand the land. You have to understand the old oak ranch. And most importantly, you have to understand my grandfather, Arthur Vale. The ranch wasn't just a piece of property. It was a living, breathing thing. My grandfather bought it 60 years ago when it was just scrub brush and rocks. He built the barn with his own hands. He planted the oaks that lined the driveway. I grew up there. While Alyssa was busy in the city, taking ballet lessons and attending prep schools that required uniforms costing more than a horse, I was at the ranch. My parents, Grant and Linda, never liked the place. "It smells like manure," my mother would say, wrinkling her nose every time we pulled into the gravel drive. "Arthur, why don't you sell this dump and move into a condo in town? We could be closer." "I like the air out here," Grandpa would say. He was a man of few words, carved from the same tough stuff as the land. He had hands that felt like leather and eyes that saw everything. I was the only one he let into his world. When I was 10, he taught me how to ride. Not the English style Alyssa tried once and quit because it hurt her legs, but real riding. Western. Working the land. "You have to listen to the horse, Samuel," he told me one summer afternoon. The air was thick with the scent of sage and dust. "The horse feels the ground before you do, just like you have to listen to the land." "The land doesn't talk, Grandpa," I said, kicking at a clod of dirt. He laughed. "Oh, it talks, son. It sings. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." He took a Y-shaped willow branch from his pocket. "Watch." He walked across the dry pasture, holding the branch loosely in his hands. I watched, skeptical. Suddenly, the branch jerked downward, hard. Grandpa stopped. "Water," he said, "deep down, the lifeblood of the earth." "Is there a well there?" I asked. "Not yet," he said, his eyes twinkling with a secret I didn't understand back then. "And not for a long time. We keep this secret, Samuel. The water, it's for the future. When the world gets thirsty." I didn't know what he meant. I just thought it was magic. As the years went by, the divide in our family grew. Alyssa went to business school. She became a real estate developer. She drove fast cars and dated men who wore suits without socks. My parents preened over her successes. Alyssa just closed a deal on a strip mall. Dad would brag at Thanksgiving dinner. "She's a killer, just like I was." Then he'd look at me. "And how are the ponies, Samuel?" "The therapy program is going well," I'd say. I had started a nonprofit on the ranch, using retired horses to help kids with autism and veterans with PTSD. It didn't make money, barely broke even, but it worked. I saw nonverbal kids speak their first words to a horse. I saw soldiers stop shaking for the first time in years. "That's nice," Mom would say dismissively. "But it's not a career, is it? It's a hobby. When are you going to get a real job?" They never understood. But Grandpa did. 3 years ago, Grandpa's health started to fail. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, agonizing decline. Parkinson's and heart failure. This was when the true colors of the Vale family came out. "We should put him in a home," Alyssa said during a family meeting. I wasn't invited to but walked in on. "Assisted living. The Golden Years facility is nice. They have a golf course." "He hates golf," I said, standing in the doorway. And he hates hospitals. He wants to stay at the ranch. It's impractical, Dad said, pouring himself a scotch. The care costs are astronomical, and the ranch is falling apart. It's a drain on the estate. I'll take care of him, I said, and I did. For 3 years, I moved into the guest room at the ranch. I learned to change 4 bags. They want the grand view, he whispered one night, about 6 months before he died. He was frail, his skin like paper. Your father, Alyssa. They've been eyeing the hotel for years. They think it's the crown jewel. It is, isn't it? I asked, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth. It's worth millions. Grandpa coughed, a dry, rattling sound. But then he smiled, a mischievous, sharp smile that looked out of place on his dying face. Value is a trick of the light, Samuel. A diamond is just a rock until someone says it's precious. And a palace can be a tomb if the foundation is rotten. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. Promise me something. Anything, Grandpa. When I go, there will be a fight. They will come for the money like vultures. Let them have the shiny things. You keep the land. Keep the ranch. No matter what they say, no matter what debts they try to scare you with. Keep the land. I promise, I said. I'm not letting them sell it. Good, he whispered, closing his eyes. And there's a man, Arthur Sterling. If things get bad, if they corner you, he'll know. Who is Arthur Sterling? A friend, a protector. He drifted off to sleep. I didn't think much of the name at the time. I thought it was just the confusion of the medication. The end came on a Tuesday. Grandpa passed away in his sleep, looking out the window at the old oak tree. The grief hit me like a physical blow. I had lost my father figure, my mentor, my best friend. But for my family, the grief lasted exactly as long as the funeral service. Actually, not even that long. At the wake, held at the Grandview Hotel, of course, I stood by the casket, numb. People walked by, offering condolences that sounded scripted. I looked over at the bar. Alyssa was holding a martini, laughing with a local zoning commissioner. My father was showing off his watch to a banker. My mother was complaining to the caterer about the shrimp. They weren't mourning a person. They were celebrating an inheritance. So, Alyssa said, sidling up to me later that night. She smelled of expensive gin. Sad day, but life goes on. We need to talk about the estate. He's not even in the ground yet, Alyssa, I said, my voice shaking. Business doesn't wait for grief, Samuel. Look, Mom and Dad and I have been talking. The ranch, it's a liability. We have a buyer lined up. A waste management company. They want to turn the back 40 acres into a processing plant. My stomach dropped. A dump? You want to turn Grandpa's home into a dump? It's industrial waste management, Samuel. Very profitable. And the hotel? Well, obviously I'll take over operations. It needs a modern touch. I'm not selling the ranch, I said. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. Don't be difficult. You can't afford to keep it. Do you know how much back tax Grandpa owed? He stopped paying property tax 5 years ago. He was senile. He wasn't senile, I snapped. Well, someone messed up. There's nearly $1 million in liens against the property. If you take the ranch, you take the debt. You'll be bankrupt in 6 months. She took a sip of her drink. Do the smart thing, little brother. Let us sell it. We'll give you a nice little salary to, I don't know, manage the petting zoo or something. Or you can take your cut and go back to school. Get a real degree. I looked at her. I looked at my parents, who were watching us from across the room, their eyes cold and calculating. They had it all planned out. They thought they had me checkmated. But I remembered the willow branch. I remembered the promise. No, I said. And that was when the war started. The weeks following the funeral were a blur of lawyers, threats, and sleepless nights. The funeral flowers hadn't even wilted before the legal notices started arriving at my small apartment. My family played dirty. They knew I didn't have the cash flow to fight a protracted legal battle. They had the estate's funds frozen pending the settlement, meaning I had to pay for my own lawyer out of pocket. I hired Elliot, or rather, Elliot hired himself. Your grandfather paid me a retainer 10 years ago that covers legal defense for his heirs. Elliot told me in his dusty office, which smelled of old books and lemon polish. Specifically, you. They're saying the debt is crippling Elliot, I said, pacing the floor. Is it true? $800,000 in taxes. Elliot adjusted his glasses. The taxes are real, Arthur. He stopped paying them intentionally. Intentionally? Why would he do that? He loved that land. He was playing a long game, Samuel. He knew that a high tax lien would lower the appraised value of the property. It makes the ranch look like a financial black hole. If the ranch had a clean title, your father would have sold it out from under you years ago. The debt, it's a poison pill. It made the ranch unappetizing to them. Well, it worked, I said bitterly. But now I have to swallow the poison. How am I supposed to pay that? We'll find a way, Elliot said. But you have to hold the line. My family didn't let up. They launched a campaign of psychological warfare. My mother would call me at 2 a.m. Samuel, I'm just so worried about you. Your father says you're going to go to jail for tax evasion if you take that property. Just sign it over to the developers. They're offering a cash buyout. You could buy a nice house, get a girlfriend, be normal. I am normal, Mom, I'd say, hanging up. Then came the developer, a man named Mr. Greason. He drove a black Escalade and wore a suit that was too shiny. He showed up at the ranch while I was feeding the therapy horses. Mr. Vale, he said, stepping over a puddle of mud with a look of disgust. I'm authorized to offer you $200,000 cash, right now, for your quitclaim on the deed. Plus, we'll handle the tax liability. Not for sale, I said, pitching hay into a stall. Look at this place, Greason said, gesturing to the peeling paint on the barn. It's rotting. The roof is leaking. You're sitting on a corpse, son. Let us bury it. Get off my land, I said. It's not your land yet, Greason sneered. And if your sister has her way, it never will be. He was right. Alyssa was escalating. She filed a motion to force a sale of the estate assets to cover administrative costs. It was a bluff, but it was a scary one. If the judge granted it, everything would go to auction. I had to prove I was solvent. I had to prove I could take on the debt. I looked at my bank account. I had $4,000 in savings. That wouldn't even cover the first month's interest on the tax plan. I looked down at my wrist. I was wearing the only thing of value I owned, a vintage Rolex Submariner. It had been my grandfather's. He gave it to me on my 21st birthday. Time is the only thing you can't buy back, he had said. I drove into the city. I went to a high-end pawn shop on 5th Street. How much? I asked the broker, placing the watch on the velvet counter. My hand shook. The man examined it with a loupe. 1968. Good condition. Original bezel. I can give you $12,000. It's worth $20, I said. I have to make a profit. $12,500. Cash. I closed my eyes. I felt like I was betraying Grandpa, but I was selling the watch to save his land. Deal, I whispered. I took the cash. I used it to pay Elliot's filing fees and to put a down payment. Enough, Dad said. Here is the reality, Samuel. We have the lawyer, we have the judge's ear, and we have the money. Tomorrow we are going to propose a settlement. Alyssa takes the Grandview. You take the ranch and the debt. We will waive our claim to the ranch entirely. I thought you wanted to sell it to the developers, I said, suspicious. We do, Alyssa said. But we realized, why should we be the bad guys? We'll let you take it. We'll let you drown in the debt. And when the IRS seizes it in 6 months because you can't pay, then we'll buy it at auction for pennies. And we won't have to look like we kicked our own brother out. It's a mercy, really? Mom said, walking in from the terrace. We're giving you a chance to fail on your own terms. I looked at them, my family. They were betting against me. They were actively rooting for my destruction so they could turn a profit. I'll take the deal, I said. Alyssa smiled. Good, because the Grandview, it's gonna make me a queen. We're planning a massive expansion. A casino annex. It's going to be worth $100 million in 5 years. If the foundation holds, I muttered, remembering Grandpa's words. What? Alyssa asked sharply. Nothing, I said. I'll see you in court. I walked out of the club. The air outside was cool. I got into my truck and drove back to the ranch. I sat on the porch of the old farmhouse, listening to the crickets. I was terrified. I had just agreed to financial suicide. But as I sat there, a breeze blew through the oak trees. The leaves rustled. It sounded like a whisper. Wait, I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew I couldn't fold. That brings us back to the courtroom. The signature, the smirk, and the man in the black suit, Arthur Sterling. When he slammed that map down, I saw Alyssa's face twitch. Just a little. It was the first crack in her armor. What do you mean, catastrophe? Alyssa demanded, her voice rising an octave. Sterling ignored her. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, Sterling said. 2 weeks ago, my department conducted an emergency structural survey of the downtown district, specifically the bedrock beneath the Grandview Hotel. And, the judge asked, leaning forward. The Grandview was built in 1920 on reclaimed marshland, Sterling said, reciting the facts like a machine. For decades it was stable, but recent construction on the subway line has shifted the water table. He pointed to a red zone on the map. The foundation of the Grandview has cracked. Not cosmetic cracks, structural fractures. The North Tower has sunk 4 inches in the last month. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Sunk? My father whispered. But we just had it appraised. Your appraiser looked at the market value, not the pylons, Sterling said. As of 8 a.m. this morning, the city has condemned the building. Condemned? Alyssa shrieked. It was a sound I'll never forget. You can't condemn it. It's worth $50 million. It was worth $50 million, Sterling corrected. Now, it is a liability, a massive one. The owner of record is responsible for the immediate stabilization and subsequent demolition of the structure to prevent collapse onto the street. The estimated cost for demolition and hazardous material cleanup, asbestos, lead paint, is approximately $12 million. He looked at Alyssa. Ms. Vale, since you just signed the deed and assumed all liabilities, that bill is yours. Alyssa turned pale. She looked like she was going to vomit. She looked at her lawyer. Marcus, do something. Marcus looked terrified. Your Honor, we moved to rescind. We didn't know. Caveat emptor, the judge said, his voice cold. Buyer beware. You rushed this settlement. You waived inspections to expedite the transfer. But Sterling wasn't done. However, he said, turning to me, that is only half the news. He rolled the map further. He pointed to the outskirts of the county, to the old oak ranch. It was covered in a deep, vibrant blue shading. Mr. Samuel Vale, Sterling said, you agreed to take the ranch and its debts? I did, I said, my heart pounding in my throat. Are you aware of the Vale Aquifer? The what? Your grandfather knew, Sterling said. He hired my father, a geologist 30 years ago, to survey the land. They found it, a deep earth aquifer, pure, filtration-grade glacial water, one of the largest untapped reserves in the state. My mind flashed back to the willow branch. Water, deep down. Your grandfather placed a conservation easement on it, Sterling continued. He forbade any drilling until he was gone. He wanted to ensure the water wasn't sold for pennies to a bottling company. Sterling pulled a document from his pocket. The city has been trying to secure a new water source for the expanding suburbs for a decade. The water under your ranch is the only viable option. Now that the ownership is settled, he handed me the document. It was a contract. This is a lease agreement from the Utility Commission. We don't want to buy the land. We just want the water rights. We are prepared to offer an initial signing bonus of $5 million, plus an annual royalty of 3% of the utility revenue. I stared at the numbers. Royalty, I choked out. How much is that? Conservative estimates? Sterling shrugged. About $2 million a year. For the next 99 years. I looked at the judge. I looked at the map. Then I looked at my family. The silence was shattered by the sound of my sister dropping her keys. They hit the floor with a dull clink. Wait, before I tell you what happened next, I need to take you back just 5 minutes. I need you to feel the tension in that room right before Sterling walked in. Because to understand the explosion, you have to understand the fuse. The moments between signing that paper and the door opening were the longest of my life. When I put that pen down, I felt a physical weight crush my chest. It wasn't relief. It was terror. I had just signed a death warrant for my financial life. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. I hid them under the table. Alyssa was preening. She was actually checking her reflection in her phone screen, fixing her lipstick. Red for victory, she had told me once. So, she said, leaning across the aisle, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. What's the plan, Sammy? You going to sell horse manure as fertilizer? I hear there's a niche market for that. I'll figure it out, I said, my voice hollow. You know, my father chimed in, leaning forward. If you get desperate, really desperate, I know a guy who needs night watchman at the scrapyard. Minimum wage, but hey, it's work. Grant, don't be cruel, Mom said, though she was smiling. He has the ranch house. At least he won't be homeless. Unless the roof caves in. It already leaks in the kitchen, I said quietly. Well, buy a bucket. Dad laughed. I looked at Elliot. The old lawyer was sitting perfectly still. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Elliot, I whispered. Did we make a mistake? Elliot turned to me. His eyes were unreadable. The ink is dry, Samuel. The deed is done. The ranch is yours. That is what matters. But the debt. Debts can be paid, Elliot said. Land is forever. Not if the bank takes it. They won't, Elliot said. There was a certainty in his voice that scared me. Then the judge had started gathering his papers. If there is no further business. That was when the panic really set in. I had expected something. A sign? A miracle? Grandpa had promised me that keeping the land was the right choice. But sitting there, looking at my sister holding the keys to a fortune and me holding a bill for unpaid taxes, I felt like a fool. A sentimental fool. I felt the urge to scream, to stand up and tear the papers in half, to beg for a piece of the hotel, just a small piece, just enough to survive. I opened my mouth. Your Honor, Elliot's hand shot out and clamped onto my wrist. His grip was iron. Quiet, he hissed. But Elliot, wait, he commanded. And that was when the door banged open. Okay, back to the present. The map is on the table. The numbers are hanging in the air. $12 million in debt for Alyssa. $85 million in value for me. The reaction in the room happened in slow motion. First, it was denial. Alyssa stared at Sterling like he was speaking a foreign language. No, she whispered. That's a mistake. The hotel was inspected. We had a guy. You had a guy your father paid to look the other way, Sterling said calmly. But you can't bribe gravity, Ms. Vale. The North Tower shifted 3 more millimeters while we were sitting here. I didn't sign up for this, Alyssa screamed, turning to the judge. I didn't know. It's fraud. Grandpa defrauded us. Your grandfather didn't build the subway, the judge noted dryly. And as for the condition of the building, you had the opportunity to inspect. You waived it. You wanted the asset, effective immediately. Did you not? I rescind, Alyssa yelled. She grabbed the settlement agreement and tried to rip it. Stop! The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his taser. The document is filed, Ms. Vale, the judge said. Tearing the paper won't change the electronic record. Then came the anger. My father stood up. His face was purple. The veins in his neck were bulging. He didn't look at Alyssa. He looked at me. You knew, he snarled. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You little snake. You knew about the water. I didn't, I said honestly. I was still in shock. I was staring at the blue zone on the map. The water. Grandpa's secret. Liar, Dad shouted. You and that old bat Elliot. You conspired. This is theft. That water belongs to the family estate. The estate has been divided. Sterling cut in. His voice was sharp as a razor. The water rights are attached to the land deed. Who owns the deed? He pointed to the paper I had just signed. Samuel Vale owns the deed. Sterling answered himself. Therefore, Samuel Vale owns the water. We'll sue. Mom shrieked. Her composure was gone. Her mask of elegance had melted away, leaving a terrified, greedy woman underneath. We'll sue you for everything. That ranch was supposed to be worthless. You wanted it to be worthless, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. I stood up. I felt taller. The weight on my chest was gone. You spent 3 years telling me I was an idiot for caring about that place, I said, looking at my parents. You mocked me for cleaning Grandpa's bedpans while you were at the country club. You tried to force me to sell it to a dump. I looked at Alyssa. She was slumped in her chair, holding her head in her hands. The keys to the Grandview were lying on the floor, ignored. You called it a pile of dirt, I said to her. Well, it's my dirt now. Samuel, Alyssa whimpered. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. Sammy, please. $12 million? I can't pay that. I'll go to jail. They'll seize my assets. My Porsche. My condo. You have the hotel, I said cold-bloodedly. Maybe you can sell the marble in the lobby. It's condemned, she sobbed. It's worth negative money. Caveat emptor. I repeated the judge's words. My father rounded on Elliot. You orchestrated this. Elliot stood up slowly. He picked up his briefcase. I merely facilitated the wishes of my client, the late Arthur Vale, Elliot said. He was very clear. He told me, if they choose the gold, let them have the fool's gold. If Samuel chooses the land, give him the world. Elliot looked at Dad with pure disgust. You chose the shine, Grant. You always do. The judge banged his gavel. It sounded like a cannon. Order. There will be order in my court. The room quieted down, but the heavy breathing of my father and the sobbing of my sister filled the silence. The settlement stands, the judge ruled. Ms. Vale, I suggest you contact a demolition contractor immediately. The city will charge you fines for every day that building remains a hazard. I don't have the money, Alyssa wailed. Then I suggest you declare bankruptcy, the judge said unsympathetically. Mr. Sterling, do you have the contract for Mr. Samuel? I do, Sterling said. He walked over to me. He placed the utility contract on top of the settlement agreement. Sign here, Mr. Vale, Sterling said, handing me a pen. A nice pen. This authorizes the initial survey and releases the signing bonus. $5 million. Wire transfer within 24 hours. I took the pen. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I looked at the contract. $5 million. Enough to pay the tax debt 5 times over. Enough to fix the barn. Enough to expand the therapy program. Enough to save the horses. I looked at my family one last time. Mom was clutching Dad's arm, looking at me with a sudden, desperate hope. I could see the gears turning in her head. He's rich. He's our son. He'll help us. Samuel, Mom said, her voice trembling. Darling, this is wonderful news. We can work this out. We're a family. I looked at her. I remembered the phone call where she told me to get a real job. I remembered the funeral where she complained about the shrimp. No, I said. We're not. I signed the contract. The walk out of the courtroom was very different from the walk in. I wasn't rushing. I felt the ground under my feet. Felt solid. Alyssa didn't leave. She was still sitting at the table, sobbing into her hands while her lawyer, Marcus, frantically typed on his phone, probably trying to figure out how to drop her as a client before her checks bounced. My parents followed me into the hallway. "Samuel, wait!" my father shouted. I kept walking toward the exit. "Samuel Vale, I am your father. You stop when I speak to you." I stopped. I turned around near the metal detectors. The security guards were watching with interest. "What, Dad?" I asked. My father caught up to me out of breath. He adjusted his tie, trying to regain some dignity. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. Emotions ran high in there. "We all said things we didn't mean." "I meant every word," I said. "Don't be childish," he snapped. Then he forced a smile. This water deal is huge. But you don't know anything about managing that kind of money. Royalties, utility contracts. It's complicated. I can help. I can manage the fund for you. For a small fee, of course. Keep it in the family." I stared at him. I actually laughed. It was a dark, humorless laugh. "You want to manage my money?" I asked. "The same way you managed Grandpa's estate? By trying to sell it for scraps." "I was trying to maximize value." "You were trying to erase him," I said. "And now you want to erase me. You don't want to help me, Dad. You want control. You can't stand that the loser son is holding the checkbook. Alyssa is going to be ruined." Mom cried, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my suit jacket. "Samuel, think of your sister. She'll lose her apartment, her reputation. She'll be destitute. She has a degree," I said, pulling my arm away. "She's a killer, remember? She'll figure it out. Or maybe she can get a job. I hear the scrapyard is hiring night watchmen." Mom gasped. "How can you be so cruel?" "I learned from the best," I said. I walked out the doors. The rain had finally started to fall. A gentle, steady rain. It washed over the parking lot. I walked past the Rolls-Royce. I walked past the Porsche. I walked all the way to the back of the lot, to my beat-up Ford F-150. Mr. Sterling was waiting there, leaning against the tailgate. He didn't mind the rain. "Nice truck," he said. "It runs," I said. "Your grandfather drove a truck like this," Sterling said. "He was a good man, Samuel. He worried about you. He knew this day would come." "Did he know about the hotel?" I asked. Sterling smiled. "He suspected. He knew the foundation was shaky years ago. He told me, 'Arthur, if they get greedy, let them have the crumbling castle. Save the water for the boy.'" Sterling extended his hand. "Here's my card. The funds will hit your account tomorrow. My team will be out on Monday to start the survey for the wells. Minimal impact. We won't disturb the horses." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "For everything." "Don't thank me," Sterling said. "Thank Arthur. He played the longest game I've ever seen." He got into a black sedan and drove away. I climbed into my truck. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. A little loud, a little rough, but strong. I drove out of the lot. I saw my parents standing on the courthouse steps, arguing with each other in the rain. They looked small. They looked miserable. I didn't honk. I didn't wave. I just turned onto the highway and headed for the ranch. The next year was the busiest of my life, but it was a good kind of busy. The $5 million hit my account the next morning. I stared at the banking app for an hour, afraid it was a glitch. It wasn't. First thing I did? I paid the tax lien. All of it. I walked into the county clerk's office with a cashier's check for $842,000. The look on the clerk's face was priceless. "We were preparing the foreclosure notice," she admitted. "Not today," I said. Then I started the repairs. I fixed the barn roof. I painted the fences. I updated the vet clinic. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't buy a mansion. I bought a new tractor. And I finally fixed the suspension on my truck. The utility commission installed the wells. They were true to their word, low profile, quiet pumps hidden behind tree lines. The water flowed, and so did the royalties. As for my family, well, gravity did its job. Alyssa declared Chapter 7 bankruptcy 2 months after the trial. The Grandview Hotel was demolished. The cost of the cleanup wiped her out completely. She lost her condo, her car, and her investments. My parents didn't fare much better. It turned out they had leveraged their own home to help fund Alyssa's business ventures. When she went under, the dominoes fell. They had to downsize to a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. I didn't visit them. I heard this all from Elliot. But one afternoon, about 8 months later, a rusty sedan pulled into the ranch driveway. I was in the paddock, brushing a mare named Daisy. I watched as the car door opened. It was Alyssa. She looked different. No designer suit. No professional makeup. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that looked like it came from a thrift store. She looked 10 years older. She walked up to the fence. She didn't smirk. She looked at the ground. "Hi, Samuel," she said. "Alyssa," I said, not stopping my brushing. "Place looks good," she said. "The paint, it really pops." "Thanks." Silence stretched between us. The only sound was Daisy chewing on an apple. I wanted to apologize," Alyssa said. Her voice cracked. "For everything. For how I treated you. For what I said." I stopped brushing. I looked at her. "Why are you here, Alyssa?" She took a deep breath. "I need a job. No one will hire me in the city. My reputation is toxic. The bankruptcy, the condemned hotel. I'm poison." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Real tears this time. "I heard you're expanding the therapy program." I thought, maybe I could help with the books? Or marketing. I'm still good at that. I looked at her hands. They were soft, uncalloused. Hands that had never done a day of physical labor. "I don't need a marketing director," I said. "We have a waiting list of clients." Alyssa's shoulders slumped. "Right? Of course. It was stupid to come." She turned to leave. I looked at the barn. I looked at the wheelbarrows piled high with manure. "I need a stable hand," I said. Alyssa stopped. She turned back. "What?" "I need someone to muck out the stalls. Feed the horses at 5 a.m. Scrub the water troughs. Minimum wage. No benefits." Alyssa stared at me. "You want me to shovel sh*t? It's honest work," I said. "And it teaches you patience. Grandpa used to say it keeps you humble." She looked at her sedan. She looked at the barn. She looked at me. I saw the old Alyssa want to scream, to insult me, to storm off. But that Alyssa was gone. That Alyssa was broke. "Okay," she whispered. "Start tomorrow," I said. "Don't be late." That was 2 years ago. I'm sitting on the porch of the ranch house now. It's evening. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. The air smells of sage and cooling earth. Alyssa is still here. She didn't quit. The first month was hell for her. She blistered. She cried. She smelled terrible. But she stayed. She's not the golden child anymore. She's just Alyssa. We aren't best friends. There's too much water under the bridge for that, but we talk. She loves the horses. I think they listen to her better than people ever did. My parents were still estranged. They send cards on Christmas, usually asking for a little help. I send them a check, enough to keep the lights on, but I don't invite them over. Some bridges you burn and some you just let rot. I take a sip of coffee. I look out at the old oak tree on the hill. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear Grandpa's voice. "Listen to the land, Samuel." He was right. The land saved me. But it wasn't just the water. It wasn't just the money. It was the lesson. The world will try to tell you what is valuable. They will dangle shiny things in front of your eyes. Fancy cars, big hotels, titles, prestige. They will try to make you feel small for valuing the quiet things, the dirty things, the hard things. But value isn't on the surface. It's deep down. My sister chased the shine and found ruin. I accepted the dirt and found a fortune. I checked my watch, a sturdy Casio I bought to replace the Rolex. It's time to feed the horses. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive those moments in the courtroom, but I'm glad I could share them with you. I hope this story touched you in some way, or maybe gave you hope if you're fighting your own battle against the odds. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Or have you ever found a hidden treasure in something others thought was worthless? I'd love to hear your experiences. Please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. It really helps the channel. Until next time, keep listening to the land.